Immortals Fenyx Rising, and yes, the game looks as generic as the name sounds, believe me. Originally it was called Gods and Monsters, but then Monster Energy threatened to sue Ubisoft if they didn't change the name. I was fairly surprised it wasn't Capcom who threatened to sue, given Monster Hunter, but anyway. It's now been confirmed that this game is going to have microtransactions in it, and it's likely to be full of them. And I've got to say that everything I've seen from this game just makes it look like a soulless generic cash grab designed to bring in the Breath of the Wild crowd. So I want to talk about this game and also how Ubisoft's microtransaction tactics are ruining the industry. Hi, Estelden here. I don't normally talk about Ubisoft games on this channel, and that's because I prefer to support quality games, including RPGs. But I think it's also important to point out titles and publishers that I feel are doing damage to the industry. Immortals Fenyx Rising to me is one of those such games. It looks like it's trying to be a carbon copy of another popular game, in of course Breath of the Wild. It's being rushed to market, given as far as I can tell, it's only been in development for about 2 years. And to give some context, it's been made by the same team who shipped Assassin's Creed Odyssey back in 2018. Also keeping in mind that it was meant to come out months ago. So at some point in time, Ubisoft felt an 18-month development cycle was acceptable for this game, which isn't very common for a full-price AAA title. What's important for us as consumers though is knowing that this game is going to have microtransactions. Here in Australia, our ratings authority has to know about in-game purchases before they'll actually rate anything. And that's why this news has come about, so good on the rating system for not banning games here due to violence for once, and actually doing something positive and pro-consumer and giving us this news. Plenty of people though, I'm sure, would have seen this coming. I mean, Ubisoft and microtransactions, they go hand in hand after all, but my concern is really the younger crowd who are going to play this game, and that's because the title's got a very obvious Breath of the Wild feel in its visuals, character design and mechanics, so a lot of kids are going to jump on this because it seems like that's at least part of the intended audience, and they're going to be exposed to more of Ubisoft's greedy, shameless tactics. Now, I can't confirm the specific details of the microtransactions, but it's extremely safe to say they're going to be similar to Odyssey, given it's the exact same team following the exact same orders. That means we can expect time-saver purchases, and to give an example of this, Ubisoft offered a $10 in-game purchase in Odyssey to double your XP for the whole game, which to me is just an absolute bottom-of-the-barrel scummy tactic. It wasn't that long ago that Ubisoft decided to really enter the RPG market with Odyssey, and with Immortals Fenyx Rising being an action RPG as well, that is continuing. And let me tell you this, they push their games in this direction for 2 reasons. And I should say excluding just the fact that they wanted to capture the success of Witcher 3, I mean that's a pretty good reason as well, so it's worth mentioning. The first that came to mind though is that they wanted to win over the RPG crowd, who have pretty much felt burned in recent times with games like Fallout 76 and of course the downfall of Mass Effect. So there's a pretty big hole there to be plugged for mainstream gamers who aren't that familiar with great titles like Divinity Original Sin or the more recent Wasteland 3. The other reason though is that monetizing single-player RPGs is much easier than doing the same with simple action games like Assassin's Creed used to be. In Odyssey, you've got stats, you level up. There's tougher enemies that you can't kill because they're too hard to deal with at low levels. And I imagine Fenyx Rising will have a lot of those same mechanics. And when you run into a problem such as being unable to continue the main story without grinding, do not worry, because Ubisoft, they've come to the party, they've got the solution. Here is an XP boost for the cool and collected low price of $9.99. Buy 3 and you're even going to get 10% off. That is the sort of show that they're running over there, and with Odyssey at least being a mature game that maybe teenagers are going to play as well, but certainly not many younger people I would hope, yeah look, it fucking sucks, but I've accepted it for a more mature styled game. When you do it to a game like Fenyx Rising though, which is aimed at kids who might have played Breath of the Wild, they see this, they love the look at the visuals being similar, so they want to dive in, that is going to shape a generation when they're exposed to all these microtransactions. Video game publishers froth at the mouth at the thought of all of us adults retiring from gaming, hanging up our boots and moving on, whilst leaving them with all the kids who grow up in a world where scummy microtransactions and all of this monetization is completely normal, even in single-player titles. Are you someone who enjoys interesting quests that have been clearly well thought out by designers? Perhaps you enjoy exploring handcrafted worlds that really feel complex and like they're built with passion. If so, then Ubisoft see you as a nuisance. They see you as someone who is getting in the way of them ripping off kids, or simply just idiots who like flushing their money down the toilet. And you might ask, how are Ubisoft actually exploiting these young customers? Who the hell had $20 to spend on an XP boost when they were 11? Which is a fair question, because I know that I certainly didn't. But what they'll do is they'll go and ask their parents. Their parents might not necessarily be gamers or didn't used to be gamers, and to them, buying XP boosts and potions is something they may just think is the cost of entry. They simply don't know any better. It's kind of like if you go to a mechanic for your car and he tells you need a bunch of work done or your car's going to explode. You simply don't know, you're not the expert, so you're probably just going to pay up and get on with it. Parents with no idea about gaming aren't going to know that microtransactions are a notoriously scummy practice. So they'll probably buy all these perks for their kids so they can go back to browsing Facebook on their tablet so he or she shuts up. What this does is normalizes this process and it ruins gaming. Because in a world where this is completely normal and customers are happy with it and they accept it, then what publisher out there is not going to put these transactions in their games? The only reason they aren't in every single game with a reasonable budget is because of all the pushback that's gone on over the years. You look at Star Wars Battlefront 2 by EA and Bobby Kotick, all of those CEOs from other game companies, they would have been watching, dollar signs for eyeballs, wanting to see if consumers accepted paying extra funds, as in real money for Darth Vader in their $60 game. Consumers though, they said fuck off. They didn't buy the game and EA had to go crawling back into their little hole. We need more and more wins like that because there simply hasn't been enough pushback against Ubisoft, I feel. People seem to accept this nonsense in their games though, and I assume it's because they're the McDonald's of the industry, so people might think these practices are fine as long as it's in scummy rubbish. Now I admit I haven't really touched on Fenyx Rising itself, and that's just because all of this microtransaction stuff, it's just way more important to me than some shoddy generic looking game. So I'll just say this, if you are absolutely desperate to feel like you're in Breath of the Wild again, then maybe you'll get some enjoyment out of it. But keep in mind that Breath of the Wild was in development for half a decade. Meanwhile, this is being shat out after only a couple of years by a studio with zero passion, zero love for their work, and I'm not saying the individual devs here, they're probably great people, they've probably got plenty of talent, but I'm talking about Ubisoft's leadership, so the guys who are calling the shots. They don't care about games, they don't care about the customer, it's all just a means to make money. I'll tell you how this game was conceived. It was a bunch of people sitting around a boardroom going, right, Breath of the Wild was a massive hit, it took the industry by storm, so what can we do? I know, we'll do a cheap carbon copy that looks good on the surface, but when you dive into it, most of the core is going to be missing. There's going to be limited puzzles, there's no towns, dungeons, we'll just have an overworld with some button mashing content, and maybe you can kill a few giants on the map, that can be the gimmick. Surely that's going to be a winner, right? Surely. Sadly, it may be, and it might actually sell really well, so if you're someone who's not that familiar with the Ubisoft formula and you've seen this game and you think it looks really good, my advice is to keep your expectations pretty low. Don't get me wrong either, because I normally love budget titles from reputable studios, I've got no problem with a 2-year dev cycle for something special, but given Ubisoft's reputation, I highly doubt this was made with the right intentions, and by the way, just to say again, this is a full price $60 title if you're American. And if you're feeling extra special, you can buy the Gold Edition, which is nearly double that price. So what's in that? You get cosmetics that you of course probably won't be able to get in-game, and you also get a season pass. That's right, so they're rushing this game out the door that's been in development for 2 years, and you're still going to have to pay more money to get all of the content. That really should have been here if it had have gotten a fully fledged AAA development length. Incredible value, guys. Now there is of course an argument I see pretty often, which I really want to hit on the head. And that is, microtransactions are usually optional in these games, so what is the big deal? Well, it sounds nice on the surface, and it does let Ubisoft advertise the game and say, yeah, you can technically complete this title without spending further money, it's fantastic. But if you're someone who has followed PC gaming for a while, you'll remember the MMO craze and how many different free-to-play MMOs with microtransactions used to and sometimes still pop up. And a lot of those, while they can technically be played for free, the developers are actively working to make your experience suck past a certain point, unless you go in and spend real money. Aside from having to pay a big upfront cost, Ubisoft games are no different. Again, the only reason some of these titles are RPGs now is so it's very easy to use those stats and numbers against you. It's very simple for them to make it so a new story quest takes you into a new area with extremely tough enemies. They'll be 5 levels higher than you, and then the only way to progress is by doing generic, bland side quests with absolutely no purpose. Why do you think their side content is so boring? Are they actually deluded enough to think it's all fun? No, they want to entice you to go fuck that, pull out the credit card and buy that XP boost. So sure, microtransactions are technically optional if you've got nothing better to do than bang your head against the wall doing boring, repetitive content in order to level up enough to continue with the main game. But if you value your sanity, then they're pretty much mandatory. I just hope that gamers can realise there's better options out there. We don't need lazy, low-effort Breath of the Wild clones to have a good experience. There's a ton of fantastic indie games out there that are cheaper in price and are made by people with passion. These are people who've sometimes poured near decades of their life to deliver something they're really proud of. The suits at Ubisoft are never proud of their games. They're only proud of the sales figures. If they produce something like a Rayman Legends, which is a really fantastic platformer from years ago, and then it only sells 1 million copies, that's a failure. If they release a generic Assassin's Creed number 20 that no one truly loves but people still buy it because of the marketing campaign, that'll be considered a big success. There'll be champagne around the office, there'll be cake, everyone's celebrating. And that's all it is, and people tell me that all of this is just business and we really shouldn't care, but sometimes you will play a game that feels really special and it gives you that feeling that games can be art. They can be like the best movies out there, the best songs out there. Just the sort of games that make you feel like you've experienced something truly special. Ubisoft very rarely produce anything of that sort of quality, and I think most people would agree on that. I'll say I try and be self-aware as well. I don't pretend that I go around only playing the cream of the crop. I mean, I'm currently subscribed to World of Warcraft for fuck's sake. I get suckered in by cheap and nasty gameplay loops as well. It happens to all of us. We all have our guilty pleasures, but it's also really nice to recognise and support the truly great games out there. And the only way to get more of them is by not accepting microtransaction bullshit. Not accepting season passes in bare bones, bland, rushed games. At least for me, I want to support devs who, sure, they might want to make some money, great, but they do care about a good experience and they have respect for their customers. I just made a video yesterday on Baldur's Gate 3 and I'd happily bet money that even in its early access state that it's going to be releasing in next week, I feel it'll have more depth, it's going to feel more complete, and it's going to be filled with far more passion than whatever Ubisoft are putting out for the rest of the year. Immortals Fenyx Rising, you're confirmed to have microtransactions, and that means I'm likely going to have to give you a miss, and I'll probably be distracted by Cyberpunk anyway by that point, so it's probably for the best. Maybe I'll check you out in a few years' time if all the scummy stuff gets removed, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I know it's easy to ignore a game like this and instead focus on either indie stuff or maybe just games from better studios like Larian with Baldur's Gate 3, but I think it's important to give attention to all this crap that's going on in the industry, all the microtransaction stuff, loot boxes, whatever it might be, because a lot of the kids growing up, this is going to be the normal. And what's going to happen in a decade's time or so, this is just going to be it, because it's going to be normalized for the kids. There's going to be no reason to cater to adults and maybe just more mature-minded people who want something with a bit more integrity, and I don't want to see gaming go down that road. I don't want games one day to all resemble machines at the casino. I think that'd be horrible. I want good games to come out. I want the publishers, the developers to feel under pressure to deliver a great product. Otherwise, no one's going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So I want to keep bringing attention to these games. But if you disagree, if you think I should just ignore these titles and only talk about that good stuff, I'm certainly open to that feedback. But hopefully you find it fun to really just have a crack at Ubisoft and these sort of studios doing scummy stuff. So I'm interested to know what you think. And if you enjoyed the video, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.